every time you make a merger, somebody is losing its identity. And saying something different is just rubbish. I'm guessing by the word rubbish that he wasn't from South Louisiana, but he was chairman of Nissan. So he has a little bit of experience with mergers. And this is absolutely true. No matter what you think, no matter how equal you are, no matter how much you sell and campaign, somebody is losing their identity through the merger. And it's a very big challenge to overcome. Customers, associates, operations, processes all have to change. So why do mergers and acquisitions fail? First of all, so these first three are controlled from the C levels, right? These are the decisions made before you even get involved. Poor strategic fit. They made a poor decision. Whitney Bank didn't fit in with Hancock Bank, or they bought some other bank or some other financial institution that didn't make any sense at all. That's one reason they might fail. Poor due diligence. This is a big one because you make a lot of decisions. You communicate to the street about how this deal's great. We're going to save this much money. Here are the synergies we're going to make. Here are the number of employees we're going to have. If you don't do that proper due diligence based on only public information, because what do banks that are being acquired don't like to give up? Information. What do banks that are doing the acquiring want? Information to make those decisions on. So it's a very big tug and pull because what happens if the deal falls through? The merger, all that information you gave up is now in the competitor's hands. So that's why they want to hold on to it. So it's a very big deal, this due diligence. Acquire, overpay for the bank, right? We did bad math. We had bad information, bad due diligence. So we said, we'll pay this price. Well, after we got into it, we should have paid $20 million less for that bank or that company. And now we've got a bad deal that we've got to make up for somehow through cuts. So those first three are controlled really before, and we got a lot of different audiences in the room of PMs. I will tell you the first place, if a merger gets announced in your bank, or your company rather, I'm used to banks, sorry. If a merger gets announced in your company, the first place they're going to tap to fill that merger team is y'all. It is the PMs that are going to be filling that merger team. Very big leadership roles. So a lot of these lessons learned can apply to you, that you can talk to your management who will not have heard this presentation and have gone through this. So here's the last one. Here's the one we can control. First three, by the time you find that out, these first three are done. But this last one is ineffective integration efforts that do not effectively execute a plan to merge people, processes, or technology. And recognize that I said merge people, because you have to have a plan to merge people, not just systems. That's what this presentation was told me that don't worry about the system stuff. We're all IT people, we get that. But a plan to merge people and processes. Because somebody is, as Carlos told us, somebody is losing their identity. And we're told that we're going to choose this process that you've been using for 20 years that you, sir, came up with, your system that you love, you developed, you spent your life's blood working on, we're scrapping it. We're going with this one because we like it better. So a very big obstacles to overcome. So what do we have to do? To start off, think about the project process, right? The first thing you want to do is get that clear sort of overarching big why. What I talk to my team about all the time is the big why. So a directional strategy for management is absolutely key, because how do we know how to design the integration team? How do we accomplish the mission if we don't know what the mission is? Because the mission of a merged company is different than the mission of each of those companies before then. So it's very important that management set the direction at the get-go, just like we all demand our project sponsors set the mission, that we all tie our requirements to, and we tie the design of those requirements. Same thing with this. We have to have that big why. So critical to set a clear directional strategy and document and communicate that strategy to the team. Let everybody know what kind of bank or what kind of company we're going to be. We're going to be more wholesale, we're going to be more retail, we're going to be more debit card, or whatever it is. You got to set those big strategies about what we're going to be as a combined bank. Strategic decisions, this is a big one, should not be revisited more than once made. All right, this is what happens in projects. You know this. Let's localize this to your projects. Big project, here's the big why. 6 months into it, you know what? I'm going to change that big why. Well, guess what? 6 months is gone. You have scrapped everything you've already done. Same thing with this. Strategic decisions, once made, have to be stuck to. This is what executive management has to do. It's critical for the success of the merger, because we're all hundreds and hundreds of people. In the Whitney Hancock merger, we had 200 full-time people doing nothing but working on the merger. We had 5,000 employees, roughly 1,000 interfaces that had to be touched and decisioned, roughly 200 systems that had to be touched and decisioned. And so when you start to make those big decisions and change your mind later on, that's a lot to undo. It's a lot to undo, and it will absolutely kill the merger. High-level business strategy should drive most of the integration effort, right? So before you go off and design an integration team, you have to know what that big level mission is, so you can design a team that can accomplish a specifically that, and not just some general integration, okay? Any questions? Look, you guys stop me, very interactive, stop me for questions or whatever you guys want through this whole thing. Okay, more on tech directional strategy. Delaying high-level decision. So our merger went for 14 months. We started in February, I believe, and ended in March. 13 months. Started in February and ended in March. Due diligence was 3-4 months before that start date of February. So about an 18-month ordeal. So the delay of the high-level decisions may have a cascading, not may, should, but will have a cascading impact on the integration. You have to set deadlines on the decision. So who we're going to keep, who we're not going to keep, what system we're going to go with, what system is, between these two systems that are both equal in stature and equal in history and equal in development, which one are we going with? You got to set a deadline for that and hold management and yourselves accountable to that, because if you miss those deadlines, it just starts trickling, because then you got 200 people sitting around waiting. 200 people doing nothing but waiting on that decision, because it drives everything after that fact, okay? Senior, this is a big one I'm big on. I'm big on my company now, and I'm big on here. So senior execs of both companies have different opinions, right? This is the culture difference. So guess what? You get bought, you're ticked off. If you're the C level of a company that got bought, you are ticked off, because somebody's about to tell you what to do. And if you are the acquiring company of a equal-sized company, you're ticked off because you don't know if they're going to choose you or him or her. Which one are we going with? So is somebody above you making those decisions? Well, senior executives, and what strategy are we going to go with? Whitney was mainly a commercial bank. Hancock was mainly a retail bank. Where are we going to focus? Which direction are we going to go? And to combine the company. It could be different than we do individually. So, but senior executives have to get in a room, they have to yell and spit and scream and claw each other's eyes out and figure out a decision. But when they make that decision, they come out of here with arm in arm on that decision, and you stand behind it, whether you agree with it or you disagree with it. If you are a hired executive of a combined company, you have to stand arm in arm with those decisions. Water cooler talk from executives will absolutely undercut a merger. The whole thing. One high-level executive complains about some decision that they were a part of, in the room for, and all of a sudden, everybody under that person, who could be 500 people, could be 500 people that it starts to trickle down to, it will kill the morale. It will kill the merger. People will start to flee the ship and get jobs elsewhere if an executive is not bought in and campaigning as to why this combined merger makes sense. Go out there and sell it. Even if you don't believe it, you got to. If you're a hired executive, you got to get behind ideas that you might not agree with. It's just part of doing business.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How soon can these teams begin to form and start these strategic decisions and processes in advance of the overall approval that it's going to be accepted? I mean, I know that there are probably legal ramifications that have to be adhered to.
There are. It's a very dicey situation, frankly. So for a few months, really, before the merger got officially announced, our executives and board members were doing their thing. They were talking, figuring it out, who's going to be CEO, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. And then once the merger was announced, those highest level decisions were made. So then immediately after the merger's announced, then everybody's kind of in the game. Then you start to get that one downs, right? You get the one down people in the room, who's going to do this, who's going to do that, and the one downs from there. And those decisions are driven from the top. But there's this legal day one, which for our case, James, when was legal day one? We started in March and we did it in what? May. So from March to May, we were operating as a merger, trying to get the merger together, but we're not legally combined until May. So there was a lot of clean rooms we had to have, things we could put in the clean room that Whitney couldn't see, and things they put in the clean room that we couldn't see, and decisions were made in a only Whitney and only Hancock, and we couldn't solicit their customers, and Whitney couldn't solicit ours. So it's very dicey, and legal drives all that. And it's frustrating, and it is frustrating to go through that process, because you can't talk openly to hey, what do y'all do? Well, I can't tell you. I tell Matt. Well, how do we make a decision? Well, I don't know. How do we make a decision? It's a very complicated situation that you have to kind of feel your way through. But directional strategy from the top has to drive it. And that's the key. That's why I focus on that so much. But it's not a good answer. I recognize that it's a complicated situation that's going to be unique for everybody. Synergies, okay, Did I do all this? Yes. Okay, synergies and finances. Synergies are political. Synergies are painful. So why do you do mergers? To save money. You get synergies. I can eliminate this many jobs or that many systems and do this combined company more efficiently than I can do them separately. So you have to get rid of stuff, right? That's why you merge. You either want to get into a new business, but in our case, we're bank. It's not like Google buying Nest or something. It's a completely the same business for you. So you have to get rid of stuff, right? So how do you do that? Synergies. And so what do? Immediately with this due diligence that I focused on, so how do you go out and get that? You got to go out and do due diligence to find out how much money we can save. And you almost immediately have to communicate that to the street. Here's the hundreds of millions of dollars down to I think ours was $134 million. Here's what we're going to save. Street, everybody in Wall Street, this is what we're going to save. And then we go back into the room and go, how are we going to do that? Uh-oh, $134 million. That seems like a lot. How are we going to do that? Well, that's when you start getting to this political game, right? The due diligence is key. So if you communicate $134 million and it should have been $110 million, well, now you got a problem, right? Due diligence is key. Savings targets must guide the design of the new operating model. So if I decide I'm going to cut $500 million, well, the only possible way I can do that is to cut out a specific line of business. Well, the target has to be that. You have to go do that. So you have to look at that savings target and set up your operating model and your design to accomplish it, just like we do in projects, right? Big why. It must tie to strategy. So you set two targets. One that you talk to the street about, $134 million, then you communicate 10, 15% higher to give you some buffer. Because you're never going to hit just it. You got to shoot for something higher and be able to tweak and adjust and all that throughout the process in order to hit the thing you communicate to the street, because it is rock solid. There is no ambiguity about what you communicate to the street. You have to hit that number. And so there's a lot of political stuff in this. And so what you end up doing is assigning out specific costs. So like to a retail work stream, and I'll talk about that in a second, or a wholesale work stream, you've got to save $10 million, you've got to save $5 million, technology, you've got to save $10 million, and you get up to that 134 number, and everybody has to go do it. And it's very, very challenging. Some of those things are arbitrary, they come up very quickly, but what you end up doing is, what's the easiest thing to save money on, right? What's the easiest things I save money on? Quickly. People. And that's very painful. It's a very painful thing to go through. So you got to be very careful about the synergies targets. The budget. You go through a merger, all of a sudden, everything in the bank gets charged to the merger. You could be, I want a new vending machine. Book it to the merger. I want some new coffee. Book it to the merger. Everything, just book it there. And they won't even notice. And so what happens? That merger number that you set is communicated to the street. The merger number gets communicated to the street. Here's what we're going to spend on the merger. Here's what we're prepared to spend on the merger. And once you do that, you're locked in. And if you blow that, and it's not secret, it's public traded information, they can figure it out. Those analysts are smart. They'll back into it. If you blow that, it's painful. If you spend $10 million on a merger than you plan to, all of a sudden the numbers don't look so good. So you got to be rock solid about that number. And once public, very difficult to change. To maintain accountability, do not assign the same synergy targets to multiple areas, what I talked about. We don't want to assign technology and operations $10 million. Because guess what? There's a director of technology and there's a director of operations. So when somebody gets 6 and somebody gets 3, and you're one short, they're going to just point at each other. No, technology should have gotten that. I got my share. So you got to assign different synergy targets to different areas. There's accountability there. Guiding principles are a very big sort of thing that has to be set from the leadership level. And again, sort of this big why, it'll guide behaviors throughout the merger. So what kind of merger are we going to do? We got to have quality. We got to make sure we have quality, no errors, best products, best system choices, or are we hitting the date? We have to hit a date in order to hit the synergies that we have to. Degree of quality versus speed to deliver. It is a decision you have to make between one or the other. You cannot have both. You cannot have all quality and all speed. It just doesn't work like that. Value drivers, are we going with skill-based employees or cost-based employees? Risk, limited, we're going to limit our risk as much as we can, or we're not going to worry about loss of revenue or share numbers in some instances, or shared customers. Decision-making approach, this is big. In some companies, it's from below up, and some companies, it's from the top down. And so you compare that against your existing decision-making approach, and it matters. It matters because if you change this, you're changing the culture of one of those people. Somebody's losing their identity, right? You're changing that. So this is a very big thing to manage. If you're all of a sudden going from below somebody 2 levels down who's making that decision, and now I got to get approval from top down, it's a big shift. So establish guiding principles. Here's an example of a guiding principle. These guys will know it very well. Integrate first, perfect later. Let's combine the systems, and let's worry about enhancing them later. We got to get them combined. We got to get operating. We got to get on one system. Then we'll worry about turning on the bells and whistles that somebody had on this side and somebody had on this side. So integrate first, perfect later is an example of a guiding principle that you constantly heard. You have to constantly reinforce these all the time because it drives decisions. So all the time we'd say, well, I want this. And somebody would go, integrate first, perfect later. All right, take it off the table. Just like that. So those guiding principles are very important to communicate and constantly pound into people. So here's an example of an organizational structure that we did for the merger itself. Right? All these guys are horizontals and verticals, and bringing back all these memories. And by the way, so this is the Hancock team, which are clearly not in sales because they're all sitting together. But most of these folks went through the merger for that 17-month period that we were all together. This is as good as you've ever seen them, trust me, because they look like a heck of a lot worse at 3 in the morning eating pizza.
We're back out,
So mergers are tough, right? The hours you put in are palpable, and you're proof of that. So the management committee would be our C-level folks, right? They're just overseeing the whole sort of decision-making and strategies. Then we have a specific integration steering committee that would combine members of lines of business leaders as well as back office type leaders that sort of drove the decision-making of the merger itself. Any big decisions, cost decisions, strategy decisions, and drive. An integration director, that's a bad dude or woman that you got to have right there because that person is going to have decision-making authority. They're going to make decisions that will absolutely tick one half of the people off every time they make a decision. There is never a decision that they will make that will satisfy everybody. So that person has to have thick skin. They have to be able to yell. They have to be able to pat people on the back when they cry. They have to be able to stand people up and motivate them because that person has more stress on them for that entire period than anybody in the company ever will. It is a very stressful position. So Office of Integration Management, this is kind of like our project control office. They determine the processes that we followed and our sort of methodologies and which templates we were going to use and when they were due and that sort of stuff. We had a big beefy set of people here from Accenture, in our case, that helped run that. Business Integration Risk Management Office was an interesting concept. It was a different firm we had, KPMG, and their sole responsibility was to, guess what, when you go through a merger, you're going to be audited. You're going to be audited, and people are going to come in and scrutinize every single thing you did. So the Business Integration Risk Management sort of sat in with us in our building of the merger building and oversaw and said, hey, what about this? What about that? Did you think about this? You better document this. And so kind of on our team, but pointing out stuff that we needed to do. So when the FDIC came calling and the Fed came calling and the auditors came calling, we have our ducks in a row ready for that. And they also pointed out real risks. These weren't just auditors, these were people who had been through mergers before, and were able to say, did you think about this? But, in a different manner, a different prism, they were looking through outside in, so it gave us a really unique perspective. So here's how we lined up. These are your vertical work streams, so basically lines of business. People responsible for producing the numbers that you have promised people. And these are your horizontal work streams. These are the people supporting each of these areas in order for them to accomplish their numbers. So these interactions were key. So retail line of business had to have people from implementation, technology, finance, corporate risk, all these different areas involved in their line of business and their work stream, we call them, in order for them to make those decisions. Because you can't make customer decisions without involving risk and customer experience and training as you train the front line. So all these areas have to be plugged in across these lines of business. And this horizontal vertical sort of concept was very successful. It worked out really, really well. It took us a while to get our kind of cadence to figure out who's doing what and what those hours are. But I will tell you, I don't know what other way to do it. You got to have these are work streams too, right? So this is an implementation team. So maybe 15 people on this team have a spread out across these lines of business and all coordinate across. So very interesting concept. Any comments or questions around that from you guys? Yeah. All right. So this is more your, same thing, value creation on the vertical work streams, ultimately accountable for everything, horizontal work streams are enablers. Enable these vertical work streams to accomplish their mission. All right. So here's just some key points I kind of pulled out of different things as far as organizational structure. Executive leadership of combined bank should choose key leaders of positions and stand behind those decisions. This goes back to my water cooler talk, right? You can't choose somebody and then walk out of the room and go, I can't believe we chose him. It undercuts everything you do. Integration leaders should be dedicated to effort. Anybody that's involved as a leader of the effort, that's all they're doing. You don't run commercial and then participate as a leader in the integration. You got to be all in. It's 18-hour days. There's no other time for anything else.
How does that impact the business that you have to be dysfunctional bank, dysfunctional business?
Big time. Big time. Because what else you do? I'll talk about this in a little while. You're pulling people out of commission-paying jobs and saying, now come work here. I know you're not selling anything, but I need you here 18 hours a day. What? How am I going to get paid? We'll talk about that in a minute, but it absolutely affects the business. You almost have to go into a stagnation period over the course of that year where and merger becomes the excuse for everything. Every quarter, when you communicate to the street, it becomes merger. That's why the numbers stink. I mean, we're doing our thing on each side, but hey man, we're trying to merge, and everybody kind of gives you that sort of forgiveness period over the course of that stagnation period. But as soon as you come out of it, if you don't hit the ground running, they will pound you into the ground. So it's very key. Yes.
KPMG the auditor for both banks pre-merge?
No, PwC was for Hancock. I don't know who was for Whitney.
That was another little controversy. Who gets to be the lead auditor?
No doubt. A lot of controversy around that every time you change auditor. I believe it went to Hancock and PwC for the time being after the merger. But no way around it. It affects the business. It affects every single thing in the company for a merger of this size, when you're doubling in size. Communicate leadership structure and decision-making process early. People want to know, who do I go to talk to get a decision? Who's making the decisions for me? You got to communicate that leadership structure. Who's in charge of what area, and do it early. This is one of the things that you got to spend 20-hour days coming up with in the first few weeks, because fear is the biggest factor we'll talk about in just a minute. So guess what happens in a merger? We don't have enough PMs. There's not enough project managers in the company to all of a sudden combine two $10 million companies. So we got to train other people to be PMs. You look good, but can you document stuff? All right, well, come with me. Let me show you how to do it. Project management roles and responsibilities have to be trained, right? You have to show what requirements mean, what design means. We're not going to know if y'all are a PMP and black belt this and that. You got to train them at a high level. They're sort of real world. Here's how we're going to do this. Here's the templates you're going to use. Here's who you got to with questions, because there's no way around it. You're going to have other help with running projects. Here's a big one. Individuals dedicated to the merger should have organizational reporting alignment to the integration director, the program director. Or if I pull somebody out of a line of business, out of commercial banking, I pull them out of that line of business and say, you're full-time on the merger. So I got the integration director trying to tell him what to do because he's full-time on the merger, but he still reports to somebody in commercial. Who does he listen to? What's the priority there? So anybody assigned to the merger, all in, should have organizational alignment to the integration director. Any questions around that?
What do you do about backfilling the person who's controlled?
Everybody works harder. That's what you do.
What is that person go about? If he's on merger, is he?
He's not doing his old job.
So
Everybody works harder. Somebody else fills in. Yes, somebody else fills in that gap. Every 5,000 person in our company was affected and worked harder for that. It wasn't just the 200 people on the merger. Everybody had to pick up the slack. It's just the way it is. We're getting to that. All right? That's a big one. Compensation and retention approach. Incentive plans and retention. That's all anybody cares about. This is all anybody cares about. When you're an employee, all you care about is yourself. As we all do. We all care about ourselves. Am I going to get paid? Am I going to feed my family? Like, I'm going to work 20-hour days? All those sorts of questions. So short and long-term retention approaches have to be developed quickly and communicated. There's a short-term thing. You're not going to figure out all the long-term things for an entire 5,000 person company. So there's a short-term thing. It's, hey, hang with us. we'll pay you this to stay till this date, and by that date, we'll figure out the rest. But until we figure it out, you gotta stay with us. Please stay with us. Here's what we're gonna pay you to do that. I'm telling you, you have this many X thousands of dollars. I need you to stay for this amount of time. Will you do? And that's what you do. So then there's other aspects of that. So in our case, the merger central was in Gulfport, Mississippi. So I'm looking at my New Orleans table here. I'm taking New Orleans people out and saying, I want you to come to Gulfport 4 to 5 days a week. You're going to be working 18-hour days, so we'll pay for your hotel if you want one, or you can drive back and forth. But they have families, they have dogs that have kennel costs now, they have daycare costs, so every family is affected in a merger. Everybody is affected in a merger because we're asking these people to drive 90 miles either every day or staying away from home 4 nights a week. So you got to pay them for that. And that's outside the normal scope of what you do for a living. So we're going to pay you extra for that. So you got to incent them to want to do that. And the same with anybody, like even people that lived in Gulfport were working. I worked 10-hour days and I'm working 18-hour days, and I'm working every weekend and all that stuff. So you got to pay people for that. You can't just expect them to all of a sudden change. If you don't, you can make the decision not to and save your money that way, but you'll see people posting resumes and getting the heck out of there. So you got to take care of people and prioritize this and do it as soon as possible. Who does it? Management has to determine who does it, and you just work by department and level by level, and I'll get to how we kind of do that in a minute. So employee communications, right? So the merger employee communications is some stupid little thing I found on thing, but don't send out a voicemail saying, hey, we got a merger going. You want to be very careful because as soon as you communicate this wrong and what's going to happen next, resumes start to go out. Everybody starts to head for the hill because my job's not that great and this job's hired for the same amount of money and I don't know what the heck's going to go on here. I got to get out now. Okay? So you got to communicate very carefully with this time here. Employee communications, better communicate early, as no communication causes angst. You're not going to know everything. In our regular world, we sit around for weeks and we plan the communication, get this person to pay, legal to buy off on it, compliance to buy off on it. Is it pretty? Does it look good and all that? In the merger world, get it out. You got to tell people what you know. Hey, here's what I know. Here's what I think I'll know in 2 weeks. Until then, this is all I got. And people want to know that because guess what? When you don't communicate, if there's silence, resumes start to go out. People start getting scared. And the sense of scared, if people are scared, they will flee. And you have to recognize that. And all any employee can expect is, tell me what you know. I get this is hard. I get management, you have to figure out some things, but tell me what you know. And that's all the employee wants. And I found that if you do that, employees will respect you and wait around for you to figure it out, to some extent.
Jeff, as funny as it is, that's probably one of the things that so many companies do poorly when it comes down to a merger. And what happens is no message or a partial, not fully understandable message turns into gossip, which then 3 people talk, and boy, it's curtains for the company at that point.
There's no doubt. And I'll tell you what will delay this is legal. You get lawyers involved in employee communication in a merger, especially before LD1, legal day 1, that May date that we talked about when you officially combine, they will delay these communications out to the hill. So my recommendation is to put a senior level of management with decision-making authority on that associate communications to say, you know what, we're accepting the risk. Get it out. Get it out. We're accepting the risk. You got to get it out. Because legal will delay it until they're completely comfortable, and you will never be completely comfortable in a merger.
The merger will be over.
It absolutely will. Absolutely. So here's another one. We talked about carefully coordinate deployment notices, right? Redeployment notices. If you communicate to half a building that they're going to be moving to a new location, that's bad. Because then the other half of the building's like, what's going on here? And you communicate half of the deposit operations area and not the other half. That's bad. And what happens? Resumes start going out. I haven't heard anything because you guys stink at communicating all at once. I'm leaving because I'm scared and I'm fleeing. All right? Centrally coordinate employee communications. Every employee communications, while it sounds like it delays it, if you put the right people on the associate communications team, that's all they do. Their entire job is to manage the communications to associates. It's the only way to control the message and the flow. So that's how you avoid communicating to one one department and not the other is by flowing all the plans through one associate communication work stream. So extremely important. So at the end of the day, here's my little message. At the end of the day, employees only care about themselves, as we talked about. They care about, do I have a job? When is my payday? Is my pay the same? Do I keep my same benefits? Does my job change? Who's in charge of what? Who do I contact with questions? And will I have to move? That, and 10 more on top of that somebody individually might want to know. But when you communicate, think like them. Think in their shoes. Think, man, I got to feed my family. Do I have to move? I just bought a house. I'm trying to sell my house. I just bought a pool. Do I have to back out of this thing? I'm about to sign a contract with somebody. These are the things that people want to know. And so when you communicate, I like to communicate and frequently ask questions. I would have that as a title and answer the question. Here's how you know if you have a job. Do I have the same pay? Here's how you know if you have the same pay. Here's who you contact. Answer those questions. Don't just communicate in these nuanced things that, this corporate sort of minded communications. Communicate to people. At the end of the day, you're dealing with people, and you got to talk to people like they're people, and not the numbers on the page. Well, so how do you do that? Welcome packets, employee Q&A, websites, getting to know you, visits by newly named leaders should all be used. In all instances, you're not dealing with people. Communicate directly, but with compassion, and avoid we'll see. Think about back when you were a kid, and I have kids now, and I think back to the time when I was a kid. Worst thing you could say to a kid, can I have this? We'll see. Right? We'll see. But that means no, but I don't really know if it's no, but I'm pretty sure it's no. Do you have a job? Do you keep the same pay? We'll see. We'll see. Well, I'm writing my resume. I'm getting the heck out of Dodge because we'll see doesn't cut it. Communicate directly, but with compassion. Tell them what you know, and when will you know more. All right, associate performance incentive plan of retention. So here's what people think, right? After the merger goes well, I hope the employees of this company will be evaluated fairly compared to those in the buying company. And we already have a bald guy, right? So somebody's looking around going, wait, that person does the same job as me. Which one of us is going to be kept? And then you start to go in protection mode or flee mode. You start to, here's what I can do. I'm good at this. I'm better at that. And that person's going, I'm getting the heck out of Dodge because that person's better, or I think I'm better, or whatever it is. So you got to communicate directly and put people at ease. Key employee list. I think your question was around how do you evaluate employees. This is the department heads and key personnel. This has got to be done very quickly because, as we talked about, you will not have perfect information in a merger. You have to go with what you got. They can ask departments, hey, get together with your other department head, figure out who the best employees are. Right? And you start rating them, A, B, C, and D. And that determines who you give retention plans to. Because a D employee, you know what, I'd like you to stay, this is because you're doing a certain job, but if you leave, I'm probably okay with that. Right? But an A employee, if they leave, you're in trouble. You got to have that person stay. So if you want to make sure you give those retention agreements that will you stay till this date, I'll pay you this amount to do it. And that's how you get them to stay. It's got to be done very, very quickly. Very difficult process, very political, very inaccurate because you're dealing with opinions on the fly. I would say it's miles better than it was before the merger, but not as much as it was during the merger. But yes, greatly improved our communications pre-merger. I don't know if y'all agree. I mean, from the Whitney side, the merger enhanced a lot of our processes, including communications with employees. I would say we need to go back to the more direct stuff. Personally, as you can see, I like direct, but it is what it is. So yes, it improved a lot of our processes, including communication. Ultra important to keep retention plans confidential because guess what? If Holly gets a retention plan, she sits next to James, and you don't talk about these. Please don't talk about them. At the bar that night, they're having beers. And what was your retention plan? What retention plan? What do you need retention plan? Well, James is putting his resume in. Maybe we didn't get to him yet. Maybe we didn't rate him A, B, C, or D yet. Maybe he's getting one, but he doesn't know it. All he knows is Holly got one, and James didn't, so I'm getting the heck out of Dodge and leaving the company. Very important. You got to scare people into keeping these confidential.
How do you do that nowadays? Employees don't have, the company can't make employees not talk about their compensation package anymore. I mean, it's got written into the law.
Well, my understanding is you can still tell people.
Yeah, you can still tell them, but you make them.
You can't make them.
And you can't hold them accountable if they do.
We did all but make them, by communicating very forcefully that, I mean, it's a message to the company, that sort of thing. I mean, it's gonna happen. It is what it is. So here's how you fight that. You communicate to people, whole departments at one time. So if James and Holly were in the same department, you don't communicate to one 2 days before you communicate to the other. You make sure it's a coordinated plan through that central location. It's the only way you can combat it. Coordination is the key to communication, everything. But you're gonna have people talk. And just know that when you do, people will leave. Because somebody got an A and they're getting a retention plan, and somebody got a D and they're not. So retention of boards of less than 10% of their salary can seem like a slap in the face. Hey, I want you to stay, I want you to work 18-hour days, I want you to stay 6 months, and by this date, we'll know. Well, how much am I getting? We'll get 2%. Well, all right, I'm going to get my resume together, and I'm leaving. Because anything less than 10% is sort of a slap in the face, an insult. So people don't want to do that, all right? Associate impacts, associate readiness team. How am I doing on that? 7:45, we're good to? What do we do? 7:45?
Yeah.
Okay. Associate readiness team, very important to have a dedicated team to associate readiness. This isn't training, this isn't communication, this is readiness. Readiness is so much different than communication. It's, are you ready for the change and impacts that are coming your way? So all changes occurring in an organization must be put into this process, not for approval, not for bureaucracy, but for visibility and planning. So, okay, retail, you're doing this change, here's how we're gonna plan for it, or train for it, and you focus on, right, you don't wanna give a history when you give training, you say, here's my job today, here's what your job's gonna be tomorrow. I used to push this button, now I'm pushing this button, that's all people care about. And this level of training, and what you have to train in, you have to focus on those things. What happens if you train more than 3 weeks out? Something complicated, changing the whole process, it's more than 3 weeks out, they forget it. By the time it comes live, they forget it. So all training should be within 1 to 3 weeks of the conversion of the new process. What does that mean? You gotta hire a bunch of trainers. Because you don't have enough trainers to train 5,000 people in 1 to 3 weeks of a D-Day. So you gotta have trainers that you fly in and train the trainers like things. Recognize training can affect, this is what I talked about earlier, associates' ability to the normal compensation. So, hey, commercial lender, I know you got this big deal going, but I need you to come over here and learn about new products for 2 weeks. I get commissions from being in sales and selling things. I got to sit in a room for 2 weeks. How are you going to compensate me for that? You got to. You got to. That's his life's blood. Or her. Frontline associates will significantly impact. So frontline associates are the first line, right? In our world, branches. So I come into a teller. If I have a bad experience with a teller, I don't care how Hancock or Whitney communicated to me by letter or by phone, and this is the greatest merger in the world, and the newspaper said it is. If that teller stinks and doesn't know about the new products, you've lost them. They're done. So recognize that frontline associates will significantly impact the customer's satisfaction of that merger. Staffing integration teams. So I'm going to pull a bunch of people out of their normal jobs, their normal lives, and make them travel. What I don't want to tell them is that everything's going to be hunky-dory. You're going to work 40 hours a week, and we're going to always talk to you in this voice, and we're going to pay you a lot of money, and you're just going to love Hancock Community Bank when you come out of this thing. No, you got to be honest. It's going to stink. You're going to work your tail off. You are going to be miserable. You are going to hate people. But at the end of the day, what you get out of it is a year's worth of experience that will translate into 10 years of experience in a normal job. And you'll be part of something special. You'll be part of something unique. You'll be part of a team that you've never been a part of. You'll have relationships that you never do. You got to talk in that way. You can't just say, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Come join us. You like it. You got to tell them to be honest about it. Staff teams, including leadership with representation of both companies. How do you alienate the company you acquired? You put nothing but the acquiring company's leadership in leadership positions. Hancock, in this case, Hancock acquires Whitney, right? And if we put every leadership position as Hancock, you have lost Whitney. You have lost anybody that cares about anything with Whitney because they know that Hancock's calling the shots, I'm screwed, I'm getting out. So you got to staff the leadership position for both sides. Here's a sort of meeting schedules, right? We know this in project management. So we have all these work streams, what, I don't know, 15 work streams plus the horizontals, I don't know, 25 work streams or so. How do you coordinate on it? If commercial needs to meet with operations, how do they do that? Well, you have these standing work stream schedules, these meeting schedules, and say, commercial meets from 10 to 11 on Wednesdays. If you got something to talk about with us, here's where we're going to be. at 10:11. It's the best way to do it, because otherwise you get email jail and trying to set meetings across Outlook calendars, it's a nightmare. Office hours, same thing. Here's where we're gonna be to answer questions from this hour to this hour. Get as much resource on location as possible. This is painful for the people that have to travel, but we have this building called 24th Avenue because it was on 24th Avenue. And it was this building that was nothing but merger. Everybody in it was working on the merger, and so when you walked around, everybody had the same defeated look on their face. And were miserable, but you're on the same boat, right? There was nobody walking in there all happy and glory and woohoo, welcome to the merger. It was all, we're all on the same boat together, and in that building together, and all eating pizza at 3 in the morning together, and it absolutely makes a big difference. We're on the whiteboard together, we're working on WebExes, and making decisions. I think it's very important, critical to have one location. Critical to have dedicated resources. No more than 25% of your integration team should come, or should be less than full-time. No, yes, yeah, should be part-time. All leadership roles should be full-time. You've got to do that, yes, sir.
Part-time, do you really mean contract employee?
No, I mean dedicated to the 100% dedicated to the merger.
Okay.
So you can have, there's certain positions that you'll bring in subject matter experts to lend their advice or their consulting for their particular area. But you gotta have 75% of your team full-time dedicated to the merger. Okay? It doesn't mean contract resources, it means dedicated to the merger. Okay? Any other questions around that? No, I'm flying, I'm trying to get through this. Customer experience, same thing with associate experience. Establish a customer experience team. Have a clear process on how you, I want to change this for a customer. How does it impact them? You get them into this process. All calls, letters, and every communication touch point should go through this organization. Inadequate marketing support. Marketing knows products, right? When you implement a new product, they know the legal needs to be involved, the compliance needs to be involved. So you got to engage them in that process. Acknowledge the importance of associate communication. This is where I talked about earlier that here's a sort of, associates should never receive questions from a customer that they just learned about that day from some email. And so how's that go, right? The customer comes in and, hey, I see that we got this, they got the letter 2 weeks ago. And they come into the teller, I'm gonna sign up for this new product. Oh, the new product. Let me look at that. And they call somebody over. What is this new product? Well, I didn't see that new product. And how does that go? You lost a customer. So you got to have associates up to speed on all customer communication. Customer communication projects should be treated like projects with official design and testing deliverables, because you're talking about databases of letters that have to go out. You're talking about addresses that have to be in the right place, and maker codes that have to be in the right place. All this stuff has to be run like projects, or you will absolutely screw it up. Okay. All right, this is the last part. General lessons learned. Entitlements, otherwise known as sign-ons. Think about this. Your 200, 300 systems you are merging and choosing between. What happens? I used to sign in on this system on Whitney. Now I've got to sign on this system on Hancock. You will break, the merger will be an absolute failure if people cannot log in on day one. Failure. You could spend 18 years, but if they can't log in on day one, you have failed.
So you mean healthcare.gov wasn't
yes.
everything it should have been? Is that what I'm hearing?
So we had a whole team dedicated to sign-ons and did nothing but that. And it was absolutely critical. The testing of that was critical. Entitlements and vendors are two things I would point out, and I'll talk about vendors in a second, that will bite you if you don't plan it for. Spending time in the field speaking with associates in a town hall meeting like this, talk it out, in an almost campaigning type format. I think I said that a little bit. You got to help them buy into the new direction of the bank. Don't go out and say, welcome, we're going to be good, and this bank's going to be, trust me on this one. It's going to be, you got to go out there and sell it. Why are we merging? Here's why we're merging. Here's what your experience is going to be. It's going to suck for a while, but on the other end of this thing, here's what it's going to be. So you got to pump people up and hire people or assign people to that role that can do that. Because the first impression is the only impression, right? You get somebody out there who's dull and is not believable, they'll never trust you. Blending bank cultures is a challenge, if you haven't heard that. It takes a great deal of time to get associates to buy into a new direction as they're brought into the company. Don't discount that. Don't discount that this is a very hard thing to do, is to bring two cultures together. You say it's a merger of equals, it's not. It never is. Never is there a merger of equals. Never do you have the same culture. Never do you have the same processes. Never do you have the same leaders, and it's just, what was the word, rubbish to think that you do, okay? If at all possible, avoid systems enhancements until after conversion. This is what we talked about, integrate first, perfect later. Because if you're on a timeline, if you chose to be on a timeline, as we did, you gotta make decisions, you gotta cut stuff, you gotta just go down the road, and get the systems converted before you enhance them. Never assume perfect communications. All key messages and key decisions need to be repeatedly reinforced. Do not assume people remember a date you told them 3 months ago, or a policy you told them 3 months ago. If it's an important thing, you gotta reinforce it, have the departments reinforce it, have the management reinforce it. You gotta do it constantly, because that's the only way people remember. Campaign nature, I talked about that. Demand that executive sponsors on steering committee own their respective area decisions and target operating model. That's gobbledygook. Here's what it means. People on the steering committee gotta be involved in the merger. They cannot be simply a body that we report out to and say, here's how the merger's going. No, they gotta know how the merger's going. If you're in charge of retail, you're not getting a report out from steering committee. You have got a week's worth of report out leading into the steering committee and saying, this is how we're gonna run retail. So the executives on that steering committee are not simply a decision-making body for the merger in that room. They are the decision-making for their area that they own, they sell, they're held accountable for. It's not project managers presenting retail plans. It's the chief retail officer that presents retail plans. They gotta own them. And it took us a while to get to this, frankly. Once we did, the merger turned around dramatically. Once the executives started owning their decisions. Spent a lot more time in due diligence. I talked about that. Understanding the people issues and more effectively mapping jobs. Mapping jobs. This job over here is a little bit different than this job. What are the different roles? And you got to map all this together. Very complicated exercise. Took a lot longer than we thought. A lot longer. And what happens when it happens? Angst. What about my job? We're still figuring it out. Well, I'm leaving until you do, because I'm uncomfortable. I'm fleeing until I figure it out. So job mapping, you cannot put enough resource on it, and you cannot do it quickly enough. Dress rehearsals. Dress rehearsals in our world were executing the merger weekend exactly the way it was going to be executed. So 2 weekends leading up to the merger, so probably a month ahead, then 2 weeks ahead, or something like that, leading up to the merger, we had 200 people working 24-hour shifts, not 12-hour shifts, 24 hours a day, over the course of 5 days. And we had call centers, we had command centers, we executed as many mergers as we could in a test environment. We moved stuff into fake production environments. We executed all the moves, and then we came up with all the questions and problems that we encountered. Very good exercise. Painful, right? You know this is practice. You know you're just practicing, so it's not, you don't really need to get worked up about it. I'll tell you, we all did. I'll never forget the go-no-go in dress rehearsal 1. We're going around the room, doing a go-no-go decision with all the executives. And I was like, are we gonna go? We're gonna go? But we're not really going, it's just practice. But it was stressful. But the fact that we all took that seriously made merger a cakewalk. We had encountered everything we were gonna encounter already. We made up situations in dress rehearsals. Hey, online banking passwords don't work. Communication team, develop a communication, go do it. And they practice it. And so by the time we got to merger, we had thought of sort of every scenario we could think of and had done it. So merger was kind of a cakewalk because those dress rehearsals were very key. If I had to pick out one thing that I would do over, I don't know if y'all agree, with dress rehearsals were the key to our success in life. Management of vendors and their timelines is critical. I've got 100 different vendors who have DR tests of their own, they have code freezes of their own, and we're all driving to our same date. If you don't have a dedicated process to manage those vendors and make sure they're all in agreement, as well as all the different contracts. So I've got Staples contract over here and Office Depot contract over here. Which one are we doing? That whole vendor process has to be carefully managed with a dedicated team. And then finally, I think this is it, guys. Always remember, so this over and over again, you're dealing with people. They have hopes, they have doubts, they have needs, they have fears. Talk to them from their point of view. Talk to them from yours. You won't reach them. Think about how they're feeling. Think about where they're coming from. And at the end of the day, you got to praise them, you got to feed them, because they're working all night, every night, and you got to be honest with them. And if you do that, you can't ask for much more as an employee. Is those things. Talk to me like you're talking to me, and not like you're talking from talking points. And the more you do that, the more you'll get people engaged, the harder they'll work, the better employees they will be, and the more successful merger you will have. That's all I have. Go questions.
merger, you don't necessarily, when it comes to branding, you don't necessarily choose one name over another because there's a lot of years of investment with that branding.
Yeah.
And there's value to those names.
Yeah.
So how do you go about that process of, I guess it's about identity, really.
Well, in our case, it was easy, right? I mean, you got a storied brand of Whitney and a storied brand of Hancock. Well, let's just keep them.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we did. But what you do is now you have challenges of I got a Whitney Bank right across the street from a Hancock Bank in certain markets. So now I got to decide which one of those am I keeping. Right? And then I got all signage to deal with. The facilities thing is a nightmare. There's so many lessons learned we can get into, but facilities, the management of that, the movement of people is a nightmare. So it depends on the brand, right? One brand, if you're a $20 billion company buying a $1 billion company, you're probably going with a $20 billion brand, right? I mean, but with our situation, both brands were awesome. We would have been insane to get rid of either brand because they're so well liked in both markets throughout our footprint. So in our case, it was pretty easy, but it creates challenges. You got the whole, we still do it, right? The whole we and them. Well, we did it this way, and then they did it this way, but you can't help it. You got to identify yourself. We try to avoid that. Like one of the guiding principles, or one of the things we got is don't ever say we and them. Don't ever say Hancock and we. Just say we. You got to say. Well, and so we make up some stupid comments like how did
Prior to the merger.
Yeah, prior to merger. How did you guys do it? We didn't say you. So anyway. So it creates all kind of issues, and then you got business cards, right? I work in both banks, so I got to have business cards with both brands on it. I got to have computers with both brands on it. It creates all these issues, but in our case, it was easy, and it depends on the situation.
Can I answer this part of the
Yep.
So it's again another real-time experience. So I work for Capital One. So over a period of past 10 years, they acquired many banks. They acquired Hibernia here local, New Orleans, like 1800 Bank, one of the very old banks. They acquired HSBC card. They acquired IMG Direct. So they dropped all brands and everything is Capital One. So it is very, either way it works, right? Like how the management chooses, we survive and brand is good, like they are making money and in fact like they dropped Hibernia brand, they dropped HSBC card brand, they dropped IMG Direct brand.
Yeah. Well, you just illustrated two different directions.
Yeah.
So it's again like how during the merger, how they talk and what kind of terms and agreement, like how they either way they people the companies and brands.
What your customers do that.
Let me speak from a different view.
Sure.
We had a company that bought us for a market they were not in. They were trying to get into that market. So they were not the brand that you. So I can tell you it went through like a two-step process. It was like company A, company B division or something like that, or ISI, a Moody company or something like that.
Right.
And then a year later it was ISI-Moody, and then it became Moody.
Right.
And then it was Moody, an Initech company, Moody Initech, and then Initech. Okay. But I mean, I'll say that, but that is, but it worked, because I can tell you too, in like in one case, the first merger was like it was a combination of two companies that were in the same market. And one, I'll say, respectfully, but our company had a better reputation in the market than the other.
Sure.
And we walked in, and we kind of just said, ISI, a Moody company, and the guy almost threw us out the office when he heard the Moody. You know, I mean, and it's like, whoa, and then, so, which proved that was the right way to do it, because we're like, no, we're still this one, we're still supposed to, remember, this is who we are, and as time went on, then I'll say we probably improved the process, but that's the model, but it's worked, where you kind of go, you use the company brand name, with the major company's name as an Initech company, then you kind of put them together, and then you just try to drop it, like 2 to 3 years to do something.
Yes, sir.
Two things, other than profitability, post-merger, what would you say are 2 or 3 of your KPIs that generate some success of this merger? And then secondly, more generically,
I'll tell you that Amanda won't answer, but the branch future is changing dramatically. You're not gonna have a ton of tellers and a ton of, people doing loans and opening accounts at the same time. You're gonna have people that can do everything, and do rubbing, they're gonna be walking on iPads.
It's more digital.
More digital, and so.
Yeah, if you wanna know the answer to that, just go down to the old Whitney Main Bank, St. Charles Common, St. Charles Gravity, whichever way you look at it, and walk through the lobby, and you understand where it's going.
Yeah.
I mean, like I'm a Chase, and all my bills are paid, I don't even care to see a teller.
Yeah. I have one 6 floors down, I don't go to it. Did I take a picture of my check on my desk? I don't wanna go to a teller. Well, certainly, regional banks are who we compare ourselves to. Some of the larger regional banks are who we compare ourselves to directly. But certainly in each market, like the New Orleans market has a lot of large banks in it, and they're a competition.
I saw a report recently that projects your competition.
I don't doubt that at all.
They have the money, they have the market, they have the tools to deliver that.
They do.
It's like,
I can tell you what Apple won't. It won't. Going in is the regulations. It is unbelievable.
I've lived under.
Yeah, you know.
And they are unbelievable. But Apple does know a lot of regulations because they're doing PII already.
Sure.
So they're doing some of that, but the competition that we're starting to look at is coming out of
Yeah, I don't doubt it. Everything's changing. Nobody wants to talk to anybody anymore.
Jeff, do you have a chance to, time to answer his KPI question?
The KPI question was what key success factors, help me out here. I'm trying to, so clearly efficiency to doing business. We got better systems, so response times and some of those better systems. We had better systems in Hancock in many instances. Call center response times are a key metric. And that's the KPIs. We measured, 5 single space pages, red, green, yellow lights as we turned on the merger leading up to and afterwards to figure out if we were okay through all the KPIs. But the things that I talked about, I mean, really what you're measuring yourself on is the financial impact. I mean, that is the KPI. Because you can have all kinds of efficiencies, but if you don't get the cuts to go with them, then the merger's a failure. That's why you merge. If you're not trying to acquire another line of business or something, the only reason you merge two like companies is to get efficiencies. And so that is the main one. That's the only one that Street cares about. I can tell you that. How much money did you save? That's all they ask.
But Jeff, I had just one quick thing to add. Earlier you talked about the dress rehearsal and throwing all those scenarios out to help people think outside of the box, to be able to react to things and know what you would do in such a given situation. That's actually one of the things that I talked about in the presentation I did about a year or so ago, comparing aviation and all of the best practices and methodologies to project management. And I think that it is something that project management has somewhat not placed emphasis on.
Right.
And the fact that you mentioned that is really great, because that is why aviation is so safe, because everyone is so trained and drilled on all the common situations and emergencies that can arise, as well as some of the odd ones that you would never expect, but you at least have an idea of what I'm going to do when that happens. You're not having to take those precious seconds or moments to think, wow, what am I going to do? You can actually at least react to a couple of them while you're running an operational risk management type process to at least get to a good resolution. So that was fantastic. I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up.
It's the first time we used it was in the merger, and we became big believers. Big believers.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Yes.
How did your banks measure up
So what?
to what you just presented?
So these are
Are
lessons.
those fallouts from what
These
you
are
learned?
lessons learned.
Yes.
We did some of these things very well, and some of these things not so well. But what we did is, one of the things I'm very thankful we did is, way before the merger was over, we spent a lot of money with Accenture, who was helping us out with this thing. Hey, let's go around and start documenting lessons learned. So they went around to every work stream, every person involved in the merger, and put together all these things. We have a website now that has all these lessons learned. So it's kind of not easy, but to kind of pull some of this stuff out. I think we did some of these things well, and some of these things we did terrible.